You are listening to Eastman's Flycast, an adventure fly fishing specific podcast covering travel, tactics, and next level insight. Now your host, Brian Barney.
Hey, what's happening, guys? Got a brand new Eastman's Flycast for you. So this week on the podcast, I have on Jamie Cragwall. This is a great conversation. So Jamie found fly fishing, and we tell her story on the podcast, but she found fly fishing and just immersed herself in it. She's so passionate. She loves it with every fiber of her being, and you can hear it on the podcast. And so she just brings some great perspective of learning fly fishing, and she talks real honestly and authentically about her feelings and about getting frustrated. And so it just made for this really good, in-depth conversation. And I'm also really happy to have on my first female guest. It took me 20 episodes, but there's just some absolute go-getters out there. And I love having these in-depth conversations. And so I definitely want to get more females on. So thanks to Jamie for being on the podcast and putting together such a great recording. I really enjoyed it, and I know you guys will enjoy it too. I also want to thank Eastmans for supporting this podcast. Make sure to check out everything we have going on over there at Eastmans. So you can check out our other hunting exclusive podcasts that I put on. This week I have Dylan Ness. He's been on Flycast before. He's just as good at killing good big bulls as he is catching big brown trout. So it's just a great recording all about spotting and stalking elk. So make sure to check that out. That's Eastman's Elevated. You can check out Eastman's Hunting TV on the Outdoor Channel, our internet TV show, which we have a bunch of great episodes coming out, including a new episode that they released of a Wyoming high country hunt I did with my bow. I did it back in 2016, teamed up with one of my buddies, Lane Walters, who's just great behind the lens. And so it made for a really good episode. You can find that now on Beyond the Grid. It's our internet TV show. And thanks to Eastmans for their support, and thanks to you guys for the support of the Flycast. I really appreciate it. So without further ado, let's get right into this. So I've got Jamie Cragwall, Eastman's Flycast. I'm your host, Brian Barney. Here we go. So I've got Jamie Cragwall on the line. Jamie, thanks so much for joining me this morning.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for having me, Brian.
It's really good to connect with you. So you're a friend of Baker's, who's a friend of ours over at Eastman's, is how I got introduced to you.
Yes, Baker is one of a kind. Like, there is only one Baker in the world, and I'm glad I know that Baker.
Yeah, they broke the mold when they made that guy, didn't they?
They sure did. I don't know what God, the universe. I'm not really sure what was going on with the making of that, but they certainly did. They were like, okay, one's all we need.
Right. Well, it's so nice to meet you and meet somebody so passionate about fly fishing. Maybe real quick, you could just give an introduction to our audience just about some of your previous fishing history and what led you to where you are today.
Sure. Growing up, I consider myself outsidey, but I never considered myself an outdoors person. I was an athlete. I was a swimmer. I was a cheerleader, gymnast, and danced for a long time. I was a professional dancer for a while. So this was it wasn't how I grew up. And I was introduced to the sport 3 years ago by an old boyfriend who was a guide. And really I was glad he had something, but at the time it wasn't something that I thought, oh, well, I really want to do this. Until he and I had gone to the Florida Keys, and he was a person who did this as a job. Fishing was his main source of income. It was guiding people, and I found it so compelling that when we were on vacation, that's what he wanted to do for fun. So that was why I first took notice of it. But then when we were out in the Everglades, I watched him completely zone out of everything else. We were on a boat. It was hot. The sun is right overhead, and he caught 3 fish all day long, and it was like the best day ever. He was so happy and so focused, and there was just so much joy that was just like emanating from him that I remembered thinking, what is this? I must have this. And he and I parted ways shortly after. And I had fished with him a couple of times, but what I took away from that was knowing that I wanted to learn how. And I was at a real disadvantage because he was the only person I knew who fished. I didn't have family members that fished. I didn't have friends that fished. And so I embarked on this. It's now been 2.5 years, but the first several months was just spent Googling and YouTubing and trying to connect with people along any avenue, whether it be social media or just in life. If I randomly came across somebody who fished, just trying to soak in and absorb whatever knowledge people were willing to impart to me. And I started going up to the Smoky Mountains by myself and failing miserably. But every time I'd go up, I would discover something new, some obstacle that I needed to overcome. And I'd come back, I'd research, I'd try to figure it out, and I'd go back and I'd try again. And it was just a series of those trips up to the mountains and epic failures. But each failure took me to a success, and people started to take notice of that. I was on social media and I was lamenting about how hard this was, and that I so deeply desired to be self-sufficient. And people reached out to me and they threw their weight behind me. They supported me. And over the course of about 7 or 8 months, I got to the point where I was self-sufficient. And, May 6th of 2018 was the first fish I ever caught on my own. And this is going to sound really over dramatic, but that day, that moment absolutely changed the course of my life. And that's really kind of when everything started. Was, it's true, the tug is the drug. And the moment that happened, and I felt like, oh my gosh, I made this happen. I put in all this effort and all this time, and I did it. And it just made me want more. And 2.5 years later, I'm in Colorado, and every spare moment I have is either spent with my boots wet in a stream, or I'm, reading or researching or watching YouTube, trying to get better and understand this amazing sport. So that's kind of just a summary of how I got here today and how I got involved in the sport.
Oh, Jamie, that is beautiful. What a great story of you finding fly fishing, and just your whole journey with it is amazing. The way you've immersed yourself in it, and really trying to further your learning curve as quickly as you can to try to be proficient at it. That is just absolutely beautiful. I always find like us as people, as human beings, that we're meant to have passion and something we love to do and that we think about all the time and that excites us. And just like you, like I had wrestling as a kid, and I had sports that I could put all my effort in, and it was the harder I worked, the more I achieved. And when I kind of got done with school and got done with sports, something was missing. Like I had to find
Totally.
that next link. And that was definitely, between bow hunting and fly fishing in the outdoors, I definitely found mine. But that's just amazing how you describe it in that journey. It's easy to learn about stuff that you truly love, isn't it?
Totally. You take the element of being forced to do something out of the picture. And I am a middle child redhead, and I am stubborn, and you force me to do something and I don't want to do it. But if I organically stumble upon something that catches my interest, Brian, there is no stopping me. Anybody that knows me, when I locked into fly fishing, I don't think they questioned me, because they knew that it was that I was going to do whatever it took to get to a point where I believed that I was, ever conquer fly fishing. Fly fishing, if anything, conquers you. But I definitely was hooked from the beginning, and people took notice of that. And I think that was part of the reason why they supported me, was because they saw that it was just this true internal desire, and it didn't have anything to do with anything else other than I just wanted it. And whether it was catharsis that it was providing, or just an outlet, it fulfilled me in a way that nothing else has in many, many years. So I completely identify with that.
Oh, that's great. Well, it's Yeah, it's tough to put into words what it means to you, and you did a really good job of it. But a part of it is that being immersed in what you're doing, being
Mm,
totally focused on it. And when you're fly fishing or when you're in the river, it seems like all my problems or everything in life fades away, and my sole
hmm
focus is trying to catch a trout or hit that run, or I'm just thinking with my fish brain out there. And being immersed in something like that, like it's such a great stress reliever. It brings so much peace to my life. Just that immersed in it and thinking about it and in it. And
Yeah.
there's not, there's a handful of things in life, or there's probably a bunch of things in life that does that, but fly fishing definitely does that to me. When I'm fly fishing, I can't think about anything else, and I love that.
Oh, totally. Like, and I don't know, you sound like you're similar to me in that my mind at all times moves 100 miles an hour. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's part of what drives me, and it has is responsible for a lot of the successes in my life, but it's really hard to turn it off. And I found with fly fishing, your mind has to be moving 100 miles an hour. You have to be thinking of 100 different things to be successful on the water. But the minute I walk on the water, while my mind is still going 1,000 miles an hour, all I can think about is fishing. All of my energy, all of um, my entire being is focused in and locked into the water and reading the water and looking for bugs and um, feeling the temperature and trying to see if I notice anything, if I notice fish rising, or just all the things that you have to observe in order to be successful and to have something that can make everything else fade away. There's nothing else like it in the world. And when you try to explain that to somebody, that unless they're in it, unless they have something like that they are so passionate about and that drives them, they don't understand. They're like, you just stand down the river and try to catch fish, and then when you do catch a fish, you let it go. Help me understand this. And you can't help them understand it. They either have it or they don't.
Oh, I'm so similar where I just overthink the world, and like you say, there's a
Hmm.
lot of good that comes from it, and also some bad, some clutter in my
Totally.
brain at times, but it seems like it's really well suited for fishing, overthinking the world, like everything you mentioned, looking for bugs and reading the water, and what are they eating on? What pattern do I need to try? Like there's just so much to think about that keeps my brain so occupied in a positive manner, but yeah, it's so fun and so fulfilling. But I'm sure it's been a journey, and I'm really glad to hear that people reached out and mentors reached out and really helped you with that learning curve as you were learning, because those little pieces of information are so key and make such a difference in your success. And it's not success like you have to catch a trout to be successful. You really want
Right.
to enjoy the entire process, the entire experience, being on the river, soaking it in. I have to remind myself to look up at the mountain sometimes because I'm
Hmm.
so hyper focused on the water.
Yeah.
It's just so great to hear that people reached out to you and really helped mentor you along to help give you this information that took them years to learn and then
Yeah.
pass it on to you, that you're able to put into practice so soon in your fishing career.
Yeah, it was wonderful. And I do think some of that was the way I postured myself. I brought humor to it. I brought humility to it. Um, because I very quickly understood it's one thing when you have someone with you, a guide, a person who knows what's going on. They can set up your rod. They're the ones correcting you and telling you what to do. But until you have to do it on your own, you don't know what you don't know, and that's the biggest barrier. And so because I engaged in social media, I was very, very honest about my struggles. And I think people appreciated that. They reached out just to lend some support and say, listen, this is part of the journey, and you're not going to understand this now, but this is the best part. Putting in your time, building that bank of experience, you're going to look back, and those are going to be the best days. They may not feel like it right now, but those are going to be the best days. And it's interesting that you talk about success and failure on the water, and you want to be successful on the water. And one thing that fly fishing has taught me is to kind of restructure my thoughts on success and failure. In the beginning, I'm like, I'm failing because I'm not catching fish. But every failure I had brought me to ask a new question. And every new question I asked, I sought an answer. Every answer I got brought me to a success. And so redefining what I perceived as failure, was failure not catching fish, or was failure quitting because I fell in and flooded my waders and lost 6 flies in 10 minutes? Which one was failure? And so it really, because I was actively pursuing knowledge, people really opened up and took to that because they understand the struggle. They saw that I didn't have somebody else to depend on. And I think a little bit of it was, people understood. They remembered. They're like, God, I remember what it feels like to be completely lost and feel totally isolated. And one of my favorite books, it's a fly fishing book called The Little Red Book of Fly Fishing. And it's just a book of 200 tips, and it's wonderful. I recommend it to anyone, whether you're new or a seasoned veteran. It just has so many wonderful just things for you to remember, that as you get into fishing, you forget the little nuances of fishing. And so I open that book every now and again. And the very last tip in there, it's like tip number 200. But the last tip is pass it on. Pass this knowledge on to people. Like, don't hold it for yourself. Always give whatever knowledge you can give to somebody else, because if you're not, you're depriving them of joy. But in a lot of ways, you're depriving the passing along your knowledge and imparting wisdom to the next generation. And that, I think a lot of that is the positive aspects, the conservation, the being kind to our environment, protecting our fish. And so I was grateful to the people who really took that to heart and wanted to see me be successful, because I think they knew that I was in it. Not that anybody can say what the right reason to fish is, but they knew that my desire to fish was simply for love of the sport and love of the environment. And so I think that was ultimately why they imparted that wisdom. And I am eternally grateful to the dozens of people who have walked with me through this journey.
Oh, that's great. Just so genuine in your authenticity, and two, part of it is letting go of the ego, and
Oh yeah.
and you girls learn so well. And I say that because I've got 2 daughters and a wife, so I live with a house full of girls, and they don't seem to have the same male ego. They seem to learn really well when it comes to fly fishing and when it comes to hunting or shooting. They really listen
Right.
to instructions and take it all in. And I think part of our problem as males too is that we let our ego get in the way. And I've got this funny story. I was fishing on Friday with one of my good buddies, Dylan Ness. And Dylan Ness is an animal on the river. He catches so many big brown trout. He's a really good fly fisherman. And same
Yeah.
thing with me. I pride myself on being a good fly fisherman. I've been doing it for 20 years. And so I've gotten proficient at it. And one of the things I pride myself on is this salmon fly hatch. And so I'm
Mm-hmm.
on my local river, and Dylan comes down, stays with me for a couple days, and we're fishing the hatch. And first day we got some rises. I was a little low on the hatch. It can be real finicky. And so the next day I put us up above the hatch, floating into the hatch.
Mm-hmm.
And Dylan is a streamer guy, and he's never even fished salmon flies. So when we're not getting him off salmon flies, he wants to change and go to something else. And
Right.
the same with me, I don't mind a bit. If we're not in the hatch or they're not eating it yet, we'll throw streamers. And so we threw streamers for a bit and got some to chase, and then the bugs started flying all over. We came into the hatch perfectly. And so Dylan tied on this pattern of this salmon fly and started fishing out of the front. And I mean, there's salmon flies landing on the water everywhere. They're flying, they're laying their eggs. It's absolutely perfect timing. Like, we have hit it perfect. This is what, a lot of times you have to put 5 or 10 days to see one day like this. But the problem is we can't get the fish to eat them. And we just got complacent and not trying different patterns. So we're whipping this bug down, and we're pulled off on the bank. And these 3 people come by in this boat. And they look at me, and they see the big dry fly on my pole, and they go, "Oh, are you killing them with that dry fly?" And I just gave the standard answer as yes. And then as they floated a couple seconds by, I go, no, we're not. I said, there's bugs flying all over. We're throwing this dry fly. We're getting a couple eats, but no, we can't get these fish to eat. And this guy, he looks at us, both me and Dylan, goes, oh, we're killing them, bro. You got to put on the water walker. They're eating it everywhere, you know? So we had to like take a hit to our egos, you know? And we laughed so hard all day long about, bro, we're killing them. And then we just had this great day when we stuck on like a water walker or similar bug, and they ate it really good, and we just had a blast. But we had so many laughs at that, like just taking that hit to our ego on the riverbank of me just waiting that couple seconds and go, no, we're not killing them. And then that guy to share that information about the water walker. But here I think I know all this information about fishing my home river and fishing this salmon fly hatch, and here we're getting our butts kicked, and these guys are just killing them behind us, you know? So funny. It just reminds me of that, the ego and how we have to let things go, and that we're constantly learning. It's the beautiful thing about this sport is like it's this ever evolving sport where you never stop learning. You're always a student of the game. You know,
Totally.
you're always trying to take in information. I think that's what I really love about it, and it sounds like what you love as well.
I totally agree. And it's funny you have, uh, this is very much an ego story. Not, and I do think that there is kind of a difference in the ego of women versus men. And um, I am one of those people that if you have wisdom to impart, I will take it in. You know, I believe you are learning all the time. You're either learning what to do or what not to do. So anybody that wants to impart wisdom, I will take it. And I was, excuse me, I was in Wyoming with my boyfriend this weekend. And the conditions were beautiful. We had fished this one river that we had absolutely just run train on the weekend before. And this next weekend, the conditions were different. It was much warmer. The water was lower. So it was just more difficult for us to lock into into fish. And I was just having one of those days where I could not get my mind right, because it took me a while to get to get my first fish. And, you know, the fish panic subsided a little bit, but I just never could get my bearings because conditions were so different from the week before. And Drew's down the river. He is slamming fish. And I am absolutely furious at this because I know that I feel like I'm doing the right things, and it's just not, I'm not locking in. So I had a really bad day, and I let it get in my head. And he is so wonderful and kind and patient with me and my neuroses. And so he was like, Jamie, tomorrow's a new day. And I had to remind myself, you know what? I was in one of the most beautiful places on the water fishing. And I forget sometimes to, like you said, I forget to appreciate those wonderful moments of just being out in nature and being part of something bigger than myself. And so the next day I left my ego at the door. I was like, you know what, whatever happens today, happens today. I'm out on the water with my favorite person. It's beautiful. It's the 4th of July. I have the freedom to do this. And the first river we hit, we caught a bunch of whitefish. We were like, well, on to the next one. And we were just kind of scouting water, and we had noticed this tiny little stream that we had passed by twice. Didn't even give it a second look because we're like, meh. Well, we were desperate at this point. It was our last day. And I was like, let's just go. We can slam some tiny baby brook trout and cutthroat, and it'll be fine. You know, who cares? Line tug is a line tug. He's like, yeah, you're right. Walk down to the water. And I mean, this creek is about the width of a king size bed. It's tiny. And we caught a couple of small little cutties, and I was happy. I was like, you know what? This is going to be great. Well, we move up the stream a little bit, and Drew hooks into a 20-inch cutthroat. He loses it. He takes it into the bushes, but he and I look at each other and we're like, this might be something. So we move up the stream a little bit, put on some dries, and there was this beautiful bend in the river, and I had a larger, you know, hopper on, but we had put a small just elk hair caddis on the back end just to see, because we could tell some of them were being a little bit picky. And I had made a couple of casts right into the bend, and I mean, my back fly swung into the corner. And I watched normally I'm watching my bigger fly because I don't see the smaller ones as well. And so I just happened to catch a glimpse of the smaller fly, and I watched this 21-inch cutthroat come up and just sip my fly in. And I mean, without hesitating, I set the hook, get him into the net. It's the most beautiful fish I've ever seen in my life. And I sit down, I am stunned, and I'm thinking, I was at my lowest low yesterday. I was sitting on the bank of the river weeping because I felt like I had failed myself and I couldn't catch fish. And today I've caught my largest cutthroat to date. It was one of the most beautiful moments and such a perfect reminder that you have to be low. You have to have those days that remind you to check your ego at the door in order to get to those spectacular moments and those highest highs. And I love having those reminders. I love getting schooled and reminding myself that these fish exist for 3 reasons. They eat, they evade predators, and they procreate. There is nothing emotional. There's nothing personal about it. Those fish are meant, like, they're just trying to survive. And the fact that I have the great fortune to be part of that and to see them and to touch them, I mean, it takes sometimes those days of just getting my butt handed to me to remember how to be grateful and to bring gratitude to the water. And I genuinely think fish can sense desperation and gratitude. I'm much more successful in the days where I am expressing gratitude towards those fish rather than the days where I'm expressing a lot of desperation. So I feel the whole ego thing, and humility is a huge part of fly fishing. And if you can't accept that, actually Rim Chung, he created the pattern, the RS2, which is one of the greatest flies around. I fish it all the time. I catch tons of fish on it. I met him on the water in Pueblo, Colorado this winter, and he was chatting with me and telling me that he was fishing in front of this couple, and neither one of them were successful in this one particular hole. And he walked over to them. He said, I've been fly fishing for 70 years. Do you want to know the secret to fly fishing? And the couple were like, yes, please. And he said, fish are smarter than us. And it is the God's honest truth. These tiny little things with the brain the size of a pea outsmart me on a daily basis. And if that's not humbling, I don't know what is.
Oh, absolutely. That's so funny. Good on you being honest with your experience too. And we all know that we should be grateful, and it's just tough to put that into practice. Sometimes our human emotions get involved, and failure is a prerequisite. We are going to
Totally.
fail. We are going to be low. But that's what makes those moments like that 21-inch cutthroat so special, to be able to catch a fish like that. It's all the work and all the time that you've put in, and it's being at that low the day before, and then you catch that fish. Gosh, that is so cool. And then the wisdom of somebody that's been fishing for 70 years and goes, "Yep, those fish are smarter than you." And he's
they
right.
always will be.
They don't think about it. It's all instincts. And I always think, catching these fish, every fish you catch, it isn't an accident. You had to fool them. They are
Yeah.
there to, as part of that ecosystem. Like you say, food, cover, what'd you say? Food, protection, and procreate. Yep.
Procreating, yeah.
Yeah, and that's what they think about, but it's all instincts. And to fool one of them, with a piece of yarn tied on a hook, and to get them to come up and eat it, and that eat on a dry fly is so special.
Gosh.
Like, I love it watching it on a streamer. I love nymph fishing. I love it all. But there's something that is so special about a dry fly eat. It's like
Agreed.
milliseconds, but you get to see this fish come back on that fly or come up and take that fly, and they're such a predator in their environment, and it's where you can really appreciate it. I just absolutely love those eats, and after they happen, it happens so quick, almost like a car wreck, and it's a tenth of a second. You get to see this brown come up and eat this thing, and you're trying to remember how big and how he ate it, and just the details to it. and you'll go hours staring at your fly on a river to see that one take, and it's so special when you see it. But that is the funnest way to catch a trout, and then to catch one that's your one of your best trout or 21 inches had to be amazing. And it's a special experience when you get in a trout like that, and you're able to kind of have them in the water and hold them and bathe them and be part of that ecosystem, and then release them back. And then after that happens, just like you described, I just sit on the bank and I give myself a few minutes to take in the experience. I don't get right back to casting. I don't get right back at it. It was like, wow, was that cool?
Yeah.
That was absolutely amazing. And just try to take it in before I get right back to it, because it is special to catch those things. And you do fail so much trying to get to that point. But how cool. What a great 4th of July fish.
It was incredible. Yeah, I echo that wholeheartedly, giving myself some space and allowing myself the pleasure of tricking them. And every fish that you hook, it's the result of uh, all of the decisions you made. You made a lot of correct decisions, and some of it is sitting on the bank and allowing myself to remember where I started versus where I am now. And even though I've been fishing for 2.5 years, something like that, I have absolutely immersed myself in this. And though it's been 2.5 years, I've probably spent 250 days on the water. And to have been able to build that bank of experience that I'm able to pull from. One thing that I believe wholeheartedly is that two things: you become a better angler by surrounding yourself with people who are better than you. And I do that all the time. I make sure that I'm around people who are better than me. And while it is a huge hit to my ego, you learn so much more that way. And it reminds me I still have so far to go. But then the other part is I seek out new water. I do it religiously. And even though it takes me out of my comfort zone, it allows me to not be complacent. It teaches me something new, and it fills that bank of experiences. So every time I walk onto a stretch of water, I have hours and days of experiences to pull from. I remember being in North Carolina, and these were the conditions. This is what they were eating, and I had trouble locking into them. So this was where the water depth was. I increased my weight. I added a little bit of depth to my indicator, and that was what made me successful. And so I have this bank of memories that I can draw from. And while fly fishing is a lot of educated guesses, the more experiences you have to pull from, the more successful you're going to be going forward. And so being able to sit down on the bank, remember that in 2018, I was sitting on the bank of the Smokies, quite literally freezing. It was February. I'd flooded my waders. I had lost a bunch of flies. I videoed myself. I have a video recording of that day, and I did it to remind myself that, of where I started versus where I've come. In the days that I am like, I'm terrible at this, I need to quit doing it, I watched that video to remind myself that girl, though she was very, very sad that day, I'm really proud of her, because it was that girl that brought me to today, because she didn't quit. And sitting on the bank of that river after releasing that fish, and sitting with Drew and looking at him and absorbing the goodness and the joy that I felt, I have to remember to give myself a little bit of grace, because while there are going to be the good and bad days, I also have to remember to appreciate those bad days, because it's what brings the joy to those good moments. And just the pleasure I have felt from knowing that I have put in the time, put in the energy. Not that I deserve it. I don't think anybody deserves anything and deserves these beautiful creatures, but I'm going to work to continue to deserve to be out there. And I mean, that's a big part of why I do it, is just the gratitude of knowing that I probably don't deserve this.
God, There's so much good in what you just said. You're just you're on such a great path for learning and improving your skill set, and you're just all in. 250 days in the last couple of years is amazing, you know. And I just I love what you said about fishing new rivers and new streams, new ecosystems, new
Yeah.
species. Like this all improves our skill set, and we're explorers by nature. Like we love to see new as human beings, and it's easy to get caught in a rut in the spot that you know how to fish. You know the river, you know the hatches, you know the runs. Everything is known, and to go catch fish in those rivers, it can still be a challenge. But where the real challenge is exploring, going to new systems, figuring out new floats, new runs, and learning. And like you said, it was those years that you put in, all those days of fishing that combined to catch that big cutthroat that you caught, or any fish that you caught. And you're right, like it's those instincts that you're honing. And some of the decisions you make, you sit on the riverbank and think, oh, that one day I did this or I changed this up, just like you stated. And then some of it is subconscious as well. Just the way you fish the runs, the way you look at the water, the way you dissect it, and those micro decisions you make, whether it's with your cast, the river you're fishing, the drift you're making, like those instincts all go into making that perfect storm and making it just right where
Mm,
that fish eats it. And the more we can hone those instincts and pick up information, the better we get at it. And I
agreed.
also loved what you said about fishing with people that are better than you. Um,
Mm,
sometimes I learn by seeing. You know, somebody can tell me something over and over, but when I can see it in real time and then see it work with a really good fly fisherman that catches fish that way, um, that's how I pick it up or pick up tips. And even fishing with Dylan this weekend, Dylan's a heck of a fly fisherman. And he's really good with a streamer, catches a bunch of big fish. And I fish with a bunch of good fishermen, and I'm, like I'm decent with the streamer myself, and have really committed myself to learning that style of fishing and working runs. But I picked up a tip this weekend just by watching Dylan in the front, and he would
mm,
cast that streamer to the bank, and instead of stripping it straight back to the boat, he'd throw this men downstream. And so then
right.
it would get his streamer to swim like down the seam or down the run, or it just held better where the fish were holding and gave him a chance to eat that streamer better. And I had never seen that. All the bros I've fished with, I've never seen that out of a boat, that downstream mend, and then it gets that streamer to swim down that seam. Like I,
Swim.
I picked up that tip this weekend just by fishing with somebody that's better than me. And so
Yeah,
like it's so important what you said, to keep growing and keep learning and keep exploring. It's such a fun part of the process.
agreed. I I know that I could not be where I am today if it weren't for the kindness of strangers and of a lot of strangers. Really, everybody that I've encountered, at some point, most of them I connected with through Instagram, which blows my mind now. But I started this Instagram page back in 2017 just because I thought my friends and family are not going to care to see a whole bunch of fish pictures. So I'm just going to start this other page and post what I want and not worry about it. I didn't care about likes or people following me. I just wanted to be exposed to people who had a similar passion. And as a result of that, it put me in front of a lot of people who shared my passion. And as a result of the exposure to them, some of them invited me to come fish with them. And let me be very clear here. There were some real sketchy moments that turned out to be okay. I'm like, Mom, Dad, I'm going to go fish with a stranger in Boone, North Carolina. This is his phone number. If you don't see me, it's probably because he's cut me up into tiny little pieces and left me um, in a national forest. But luckily that did not happen, or hasn't yet. But at one point everyone was better than me, and so that was how I understood that being around people who had a similar, or had a set of experience, if that was a step I could skip, absolutely, yes, teach me everything that you are willing to impart to me. I will take it, I will listen. And one thing that I found compelling that you were talking about learning from Dylan, I also am a tactile learner. But there were moments where I was watching something happen and I didn't fully understand what I was looking at the time, just because of my lack of, it was just ignorance at the time. But I would find that something would hit me 1 or 2 months later where I would be in a position, I will have done something correct. It would have just been an instinct, but I would realize that I had learned it from watching someone 2 months ago, but I didn't know that I didn't know what I was seeing at the time. And I find that so fascinating that over time, like I said, you don't know the things you don't know, but the things that you start to pick up are not necessarily things that are told to you, that they're a feeling. Like mending a line, I knew what a mend was, but I didn't understand fully why you did it. And then there was one day where I was standing on the water, I was watching my fly being pulled by, it was being pulled by the water rather than flowing with the water. And I was like, I need to, instinctively, I just picked my line up and watched my mend in the water, and saw my fly just kind of pick up speed to the water. And I was like, that's why you mend. That's why you mend a line, is so that the water's not pulling, and that it looks more natural in the water. And it's just, those small little snippets of time where you feel like you're learning and you're making that progress. And it's like, this is not all for nothing. Like this is all creating a much bigger picture. I get so excited about it. And for some reason, aside from sports and, with wrestling, I swam and I danced and I was a gymnast. And there were those moments that such a goal oriented person, that's what brought me to success, was trying to get to the next level. And every little success I have just fuels that fire and continues to push me to learn and grow and try to understand. And I keep thinking maybe one day I'll get sick of this, but so far I can't see how I would.
That's the same here. I haven't got sick of it yet, and I'm still so excited to get out each and every day I get to spend on the water. It's just such a gift, and it's so good to like just being in that nature too. The rivers are just, they've got a different energy than the mountains or other places. Like the rivers are just a cool place to be. You had mentioned earlier that humility, that the fish can sense it on your line. It's so true. It's wild how good vibes catch fish. A good attitude catches fish, and then
100% agree.
confidence catches fish. And if
Mm-hmm.
it's amazing how just that, like it's in between your ears. It doesn't have much to do with the way the fly floats down the river, but it does. It's the way you think there's a fish there, and the way you get those mends in, and you believe he's gonna eat it. You believe he's gonna be there. You just fish so hard for that take or for that eat. It's just different to where if you're going down the river and you're not getting any eats, it's tough to have that same confidence or that same throw.
Yeah.
Um, so so I think there's a lot of truth to what you're saying. It is like good vibes catch fish, like being in a good headspace day in, day out, and being positive, whether it's a good fishing day or a bad fishing day, it just catches fish. And really any day you're on the water, you're one fish away, you're one eat away from making your whole day. You just don't know when it's going to
Yeah.
happen or how it's going to happen, but if you keep believing and keep throwing it in there and keep those good vibes, it does pay off. It catches fish, better so than like when you have a bad attitude or when you're frustrated. Those fish can sense that as well, and it seems like you can't buy a fish when that happens or when your
Totally.
attitude starts going south. It's so important to remember. I just thought that was important that you stated that too.
Yeah, no, I wholeheartedly agree. I can look back. So the very first year, I've been really bad about it lately, but the first year I kept a fly fishing journal and I documented everything. I wrote down where I went, what I used, what worked, what didn't. But after a while, like at first it was a very clinical, way of listing what was going on. But I suddenly started to write kind of what was going on in my mind, what was going on in my life at the time. And there is definitely a pattern. When I look back on those journals, there was a pattern on the days where I was getting overly frustrated with myself, which I do. I get really impatient with myself when I get snagged, when I get tangled. And those little things, if I'm continuously getting snagged, I will start to lose patience, and I will just lose my mind, and then I get out of my rhythm. And there's definitely a pattern on the days when it was just good. I felt good. I wasn't worried about catching fish. The expectation wasn't there. I was just going out to be out, versus the days where maybe I had a really good day on a river before. So my expectation was, oh, I'm going to kill it today. And 2 hours in, I haven't even seen a fish. And so, my mood turns, and that definitely made an impact on how I was fishing. And so I do totally agree that attitude, it really makes or breaks your experience. And some of it is expectation. I have to really work to manage my expectations. And I do find the days that I talk to myself and say, Jamie, this is what a pleasure and a joy that you have the opportunity to do this. So you just need to settle down and just take it as it comes. So I do have to remind myself that I not to put so much pressure on myself, because it certainly impacts my success.
Yeah, it's a good reminder. It's we have to constantly remind ourselves, or we slip back into those same ruts or
Yeah.
those same patterns, and it's tough to do when emotions are involved. But you're so right, and like in my fly fishing career too, it's I've caught a bunch of fish, and I fish by myself a bunch, and
Yeah.
I don't need to have that epic day, and also I'm pulling for my buddy's success as much as I am my own. And really, when I just go out to have a good time, like, I have never laughed so hard as I do with my buddies. Like, that is true comedy, being on the river
Oh,
and real stuff that happens. I laughed so hard with Dylan this week. My stomach hurt when I got done. We had so
same.
much fun. And
Yep.
after we got that hot tip on the water walker, we started catching a bunch of fish, and it was really good. But gosh, we laughed so hard all day long. And there's nothing better than sharing the river with a buddy that has the same passion as you are. And we're so caught up in everyday life now. There's work and family and home and so many things that need to be taken care of, or responsibilities. But that day on the water with your buddy, where you're free to go have fun and to chase trout and really chase your passion and your dreams on the river, there is just nothing better and nothing funner. And I just notice as I get older, I just really start to appreciate my time more on the water, my time with buddies more. And big fish, they just seem to come over time. Like, you spend enough days on the water, and you work hard enough at it, and you seem to tie into a few here and there. But I absolutely love it. There's nothing on planet Earth like it is fly fishing, especially this western fly fishing. It's right around us, and I
Yeah.
think you've changed your life to move to Colorado to be in a place where there is really good fly fishing. That's
Yep.
amazing. I live in
Yeah.
southwest Montana. There's so many rivers within an hour from my house, and so many undiscovered rivers too. Like, I was just looking at this new river that's like an hour and a half away from my house that I've never fished, and it's maybe a smaller stream, not quite like the king size bed. But you can definitely cast across it. But it's full of big brown trout in there, and there's nobody fishing it. There's no put-ins, there's no takeouts. And so a lot of times, I like these big rivers and I like floating these, but the fishing pressure in the summertime, there's a lot of really good, knowledgeable guides on it that are trying to get their clients into fish. So there's a lot of fishing pressure throughout the summer, which educates those fish. And so
Yep.
to go to some of these other streams that have a little less pressure, there's just always a new place to explore. I've been doing it my entire life, and I've still only touched a fingernail of what's actually out there, and that's just in my own state, much less like all the western states, or going to the salt. Like, that is so fun to fish for the salt, and there's do-it-yourself adventures, and it's different than western fly fishing, but it's so fun to spot those fish and get that one high pressure throw at them to try to get it
Mm-hmm.
beyond them and in front of them and strip to them, and then to watch them chase your fly and eat it, and it's a big salt fish that comes out of the water. That's amazing. And the opportunities for steelhead on the coast with spey rods. I go out every year for a couple of weeks, and it's like an enchanted forest out there with like these glacial fed rivers that are teal blue, and then these salt run fish that are just so chrome and full of sea lice, and like the hardest fighting fish that you've ever tied on. Acrobatic, huge runs. It's like the ultimate test for a fly fisherman. When you get one in, it's as big as your leg, as long as your leg. It's 15 pounds of hard fighting fish. Like there's so much of that out there that us average guys and gals can go enjoy, just by paying our dues, improving our skill set, and then be able to go have these amazing adventures in these different places. It's absolutely a gift, that's for sure.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, I've been so fortunate to, I've made it a priority, and I travel whenever I have an opportunity to go to a new place to fish. I spent 10 days in Montana earlier this year, and I had been to Montana for a couple of days in the spring, but to have been able to really spend a lot of time and spend concentrated time there, um, it was so spectacular, and it reminds me why I do this, why I invest my time, invest my money, my resources into learning, into going new places, because I meet new people, I see new things. And, it annoys me when people are like, oh, trout don't live in ugly places, but it's true. Like it has taken me to some of the most spectacularly beautiful places in the country, in the world. And I am so quick to forget, I working in a job, and you've got the stresses of money and life, and you forget where we are and what we have access to. And so it's certainly been a amazing outlet for me to get out and to remember that, life is about something bigger, and to know that I have the opportunity to experience so many different types of fish. I have not caught a steelhead yet, but I did actually fish for salmon last fall. And, this was a 34-inch trout that was in a stream. And I mean, took me for a ride, took me 12 minutes to get it to the net. And the relief I felt and the accomplishment I felt when we did get it to the net, like, I mean, it's indescribable. I can't, there is a video, my friend was there, he actually filmed the whole thing, and watching the video back, I'm like, I don't remember any of this. I was so zoned out. But what I do remember was the moment it hit the net, and the relief I felt, and the joy I felt, and the accomplishment. And, I can't get enough of it. And I can't express my gratitude enough for having been introduced to it, and for it to be such a huge part of my life.
Oh, that's amazing. I can almost feel like my body and my head buzzing as you talk about like that sense of accomplishment or getting that fish to the net. I get so excited. I still get so excited. I remember I hiked up to a hole with my daughter this spring, and we were fishing up there, and I was swinging the spey rod for brown trout in this big hole that I like to swing for, and I hooked onto this great big brown trout and had the fight of my life with my daughter right there. And so my daughter got to net it for me, worked with me, we got it in, we netted it. I called her bro. I high-fived her way too hard. Like, it was hilarious, but it was getting to share that
Yeah.
passion with her. I get so excited. It's so fun. So it is an absolute gift. But Jamie, I have really enjoyed this in-depth conversation, getting to meet you and share your passion for fly fishing. I have to say that I really want to check in with you in the future and talk more fly fishing.
I would love that. And we are 100% getting on the water together.
Ah,
It's gonna be epic. I can feel it.
I wish you were in Montana today. We've still got the salmon fly hatch going off, and they're in a really good wade section. So I'm going to get my work done here, and I'm going to go walk some riverbank here this afternoon. But yes, we
Awesome.
absolutely need to get together for a day of fishing. And I just really appreciate you. This was a really honest, great conversation for the podcast. So thanks so much for being on.
Yeah, of course. This made my whole day. Thanks for having me, Brian.
Okay, we'll talk soon.
All right, sounds good. Bye bye.
All right, guys, that's a wrap. Oh, thanks again to Jamie. What a great podcast. You can just hear the passion in her voice and her love for fly fishing. And she's so honest and authentic about her feelings and about her pitfalls, and it just made for such a great conversation. So I really appreciate it. Um, I did go fishing right after the podcast. Got some good salmon fly fishing. I got like the last 3 or 4 evenings of it up country, fishing like $3 bridge and fishing between the lakes. The same day I recorded this podcast, I caught my best Madison Brown of the year. Watched it come up on a dry fly and gave me a heck of a good fight. It's just absolutely awesome. There's nothing finer than summertime and throwing dry flies, and I just still feel so fortunate to be able to live here, make a living here, and to be able to enjoy these great rivers of Southwest Montana and the West, really, for that matter. So many great systems to fish, whether it's rivers or still water. My dad's been getting into them lately, taking his lake boat up, fishing Hebkin really hard, catching some really nice fish up there with his fly rod. So I got to get up there and do that with him as well. But yeah, just feel so fortunate to live in a place like this and be able to produce this podcast. Thanks to you guys for the support. It really is your support that's going to make this podcast survive and make it. I've got to have the audience to make this thing work. And really, in today's day and age, podcasts succeed from you guys sharing them to your buddies or talking about them. It's word of mouth. And those iTunes reviews really help out. Like right now, we're a young podcast, and so it's hard to even search for this podcast, and so those reviews all help me out. They bring weight to the podcast. That way, these podcast platforms push it to more people. We can introduce this podcast to more people and make sure this thing survives and stands the test of time. So I appreciate the shares. I appreciate the support on social media. Appreciate the reviews. It all really helps out the podcast. So thanks, you guys. Appreciate it. And with that, check in with you next week.